and disappears.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Conversation with Dr. da Silva. And our show is a TV show where your voice matters. And the whole idea of the show here is not like regular talk shows, or I'm not another Dr. Phil. So it's about bringing celebrities or bringing, athletes in or politicians. It's about the commoners, the little people like us. And like the African proverb says, it takes a whole child, a whole village to raise a child. I think it takes a whole community to take care of each other. And today I'm so happy to have one of my guests, Sarah. She is one of my former students, a senior seminar. And welcome, Sarah.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. And what are you going to be talking about today?
I'm going to be talking about innovation for impact. It's very dear to my heart. It's kind of my method for how I solve all problems in my life, and hopefully one day career path. Fantastic.
And tell me, you're in school still, right?
I am in school still. I go to school at Arizona State University, so I'm a bit away from home now, or this is home, but I'm a bit away from home out there. And I'm in the School for Innovation in Society, or the School for Future of Innovation in Society, and it's a mix between innovation studies and future studies, and it's a really great program.
Okay, now what about you gravitated to this particular type of subject?
So I really care about social causes and helping people. Ever since I was a kid, I used to say, one day I want to save someone. That was my big go-to. And so originally people always told me to go into medicine, become a nurse, become a doctor.
Right.
And I tried to. I was passionate about it for a little while. And I struggled with larger issues. I didn't want to help people on a one-to-one basis. I wanted to solve a larger problem that I saw gaping in the world. So I started looking into how people change big things, and really the history of our planet is, people define it in different ways, but I see so much innovation changing social issues all over the world, and that's I became passionate about it. I decided if I, studied the greats and studied innovation and studied how to change processes and procedures to be more beneficial for both the social world and also the corporate world, that you can create a better world.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I care about, and I really didn't gravitate towards it as much as it fell in my lap. I was lucky to find Arizona State University. When I got to school there, I didn't study innovation. And there's banners around the whole school that say #1 in innovation. And I didn't even know what it was really at the time as a major. So I asked my guidance counselor about it, heard about it, and right when she finished talking, I said to her, "You just explained me, and how have I not heard of this?" And so that's how I ended up there.
Wow. So tell me, this is what year you're now?
My junior year.
Your junior.
A rising senior.
Right. So tell me about some projects that really kind of move you, that you're involved in.
Okay. Easy enough. Right now I'm interning for an amazing company in Brooklyn called Curiosity Lab. And they market for brands with a purpose. They help build community around brands. And we get to do a whole summer campaign based around having conversations with people who are passionate about certain topics. So similar to what you're doing here. What we're going to do is go out into New York City and the greater New York City area and share some really broad, relatively disarming questions with the public that put a light on things that are often not talked about. And then we are going to offer a space for people to talk about some of those things and see what comes out of it, and create content on what comes out of that and share it with the public and see kind of how people take it. We're not really hoping to find more agreement or echo chambers or people with our own opinions and views. We're kind of doing this to acknowledge our own bias and to say, we're coming from a place where all we want to do is understand each other, not necessarily agree with each other. And once we can do that, we can have a conversation with people we don't necessarily agree with or that we disagree with. And I think one of the larger problems I see happening consistently today is a lack of conversation between people that don't agree. And we're trying to change that. So I'm really happy to be part of that project right now. That's not my own project, but one I'm contributing to, and then I have a few projects of my own that I work on too. But yeah.
So what do you find to be really challenging in this particular field? Not only for yourself, but for the field as a whole.
Innovation? Well, there's a few things. I think one is creating a space for innovation. And when you think about creating a space for innovation, there's so many different ways to go about it. You have like the Google workplace where everybody can relax and take breaks and, whatever. But there's studies that show different ways to create those environments, and it's hard to actually collaborate successfully, facilitate success successfully, and allow people to have their voices really be heard. And so a lot of the way you foster innovation is by first that step, making sure you have a diverse room where people aren't just included, but they belong there, and they feel the collaboration actually working and flowing through everybody. You get ideas that don't usually come out of the bunch when people feel confident enough to be able to speak them in the room they're in. And when you have that, to me, that's constantly innovating. That's constantly creating more successful opportunities out of what exists.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now, where do you see yourself, what would be your ideal scenario of a job or a career path that you would take? What would be...
Oh, the big questions.
The big questions, yeah, of course.
Right now, I really enjoy the field of innovation consultation, which to me means, going to a business and telling them, I want to change something that I see as a problem, and I want to give you the opportunity to help change that. But it's not just going to be something you have to throw money into or something that's going to be a deficit on your company. Innovation, to me, is similar to sustainability. All outcomes are co-beneficial. So, if you're a company, I can find a market that wants you to be more sustainable or wants you to have a higher impact in your community or wants you to, have a better social standing, and market to that community, as well as then have an impact on, allow you to have an impact that you want to have. And the great thing about that is I don't necessarily need to agree with you on what you want to change about the world, but more likely or not, you want to make it a better world, right? And so I start with what values you care about versus what values he cares about, and really from there say, based on those values, let's try to find an impact that I can make for you, and let's try to find a way that it's co-beneficial for both parties.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what do you feel is, as far as the challenge that that you just illustrated, but what do you feel is one aspect of humanity, or where we are at this point in time, and where when you're talking about values, where you may not agree, but certain people have certain values that may not be synonymous to the values that you have, and how do you make that come into play when you're trying to or attempting to create something that it's going to be sustainable and it's going to be creatable for everyone?
Yeah. Right now, the biggest problem with that to me is finding people that co-align with my values and co-align with things I can help with. And the truth is, I do want to be able to help people that don't have the exact same mindset as I do. That's a really hard point to be at when you're talking about things like sustainability or social impact, because they're jaded discussions. People have varied opinions on all of it. And it might be really easy for me to help a company that already cares about sustainability, but even if it's difficult, I think it's still important for me to talk to a company that doesn't care about it. And, I can't force people to want to work with me, but I can at least open a conversation to, not only is this something that can that you can do to help the planet. It might not be what you're passionate about, but here's the exact impact it has. And then on top of that, here's how I can sell it to you. Here's the profit margins you're supposed to get, the reasons it's good for your company, the media and press you'll get from it, and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is often, sadly, money, and people, they want to hear what are you going to do for my business, not what is my business going to do for you.
Right.
So I try to, my dad's in advertising, I try to learn that from him. You have to always start with what people want first. So I try to market myself to other people's ideals and values and wants and needs, but at the end of the day, that is definitely one of the biggest obstacles is when you have differences already on the table, how do you move forward?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested on the internship that you're doing right now, and I really would love to, for you to keep me updated on basically setting up those scenarios where you're bringing people to the table and having conversations, because I don't think people do that enough in general, but for the inclusiveness and to have people feel like they belong to something and that their voices are being heard. I think that's key because it's something that impacts all of us. I just love, your title for the show, Innovation for Impact. And, it's going to be an impact regardless, but what kind of impact are we looking for?
Make.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So, what does your company that you're currently interning for, what are their goals? What are they hoping to gain from this, and how it's going to help them?
Well, the company really cares about a lot of things. We really do care about purpose, and the company was founded off of, we want to help other brands and other companies that have purpose in their mindset. And we have a few different buckets, we like to say, that we work through. So diversity and inclusion is one, emotion and empathy is another, activism and education, and lastly, consumption and culture. And they seem a little unorganized at first, per se.
Okay.
But each pairing has a reason behind it, and we want to dive into why we paired those things together, what discussions we can have around those topics, and who wants to discuss those topics. When we talk about culture and consumption, what we're saying is, what's the last 5 meals you ate? Where'd they come from? What's the history behind them? Who makes it, and why? And, if you don't know, why don't we have a conversation about that? Why do so many people, love Chinese food but don't love the history of it, or don't love where it comes from, or don't know even where it comes from? And is your Chinese food the same as the Chinese food in China?
Right.
Is it, learn and have those discussions and acknowledge our biases. And it comes from a few different places. The group I intern with, I'm really lucky. All of our interns get to have our voices heard where we work, and get to really talk collaboratively. And it was really a lot of our own discussions that we had over lunch that framed the project and how it's going to work for the summer campaign, and what we cared about and how we wanted to talk about things. And what we started with mainly was we are all biased, and whether we want to be, whether we don't want to be, whether we don't know what biases we hold, considering ourselves unbiased puts us all at a disadvantage. And if we consider ourselves open slate, and here, let me learn, I actually don't know, I'm maybe ignorant to what's out there, other than what I'm sure I know, teach me more, you could have such better conversations. And so we're trying to really ask questions that aren't for people that maybe have the same mindset as us or agree with us, but ask questions that really just get people to think, it's funny that maybe I didn't know that in the first place,
I'm wondering if this, what you guys are embarking on, if you did this maybe 8 years ago, where all those things that you're mentioning, which is so wonderful, and you hope that people would embrace that, and people would overcome their biases and the fear or whatever. Because I think a lot of people would want to avoid those conversations, because then they have to look at themselves.
Absolutely.
So and considering the atmosphere that we're living in our society right now, with such division everywhere you look, and when people are questioning their own biases, where they feel I'm not biased, wonder. I am really curious about how this is going to happen, especially as far as the two pair that you mentioned about culture and consumption. We're living in a society that's we're such major consumers, and I think recklessly in many different ways, not realizing the impact that we have by consuming certain things.
Absolutely. Where we put our dollar.
Exactly. And I always talk about, like, at one point in time, this country had a sense of, like, not just voting with their ballot, but voting with their dollars. I'm guilty as charged. Every once in a while, I like drinking Coke, and I'm thinking of, like, Coca-Cola. Am I going to give that up? But you think that you'll be encouraged by, saying, what, yeah, something that I'm benefiting from because I enjoy it, and it's not a need, it's a want. What would be the impact if, I said, what, I'm boycotting Coca-Cola, but then I say, okay, what else am I going to boycott?
Yeah.
So the impact of all of that is, it's overwhelming.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if there's a question there. I think it's just an observation. And I'm really curious to when those people are brought to the table. And by the way, what are your demographics? Who are your
We're crowdsourcing the whole campaign.
Okay.
So the campaign has a few different legs to it, but we're going to start with a guerrilla marketing campaign and kind of advertise it all over the city and have broad questions kind of attacking people on the subway. And then we're going to have community gatherings where we go out into certain spaces like public parks, public places, and crowdsource questions that, we'll give people sample questions, we'll give people an idea on what we're talking about, but really hear what other people want to hear, because like we said, we're acknowledging our biases, and how biased are we if we're starting with only our questions, right? So we crowdsource all the questions, and then following that, the whole time we're advertising for the gathering we're going to have, but we're going to have a gathering around consumption and culture where we're going to have hopefully a cooking class where we have people from a culture with great food come in and teach us about the food, the culture, the history, and their family and where they come from. And hopefully we can have a really interesting discussion around not only what is behind your food, but why it matters to historicize things and to have a full discussion about things. Because I tend to think that you can't talk about a problem until you understand all the root causes of it, right? And even with things as simple as consumption, you can't talk about what's wrong with me drinking a Coke if you don't know what's the production line of your Coke, what's behind everything that you buy. And what you brought up with consumption and the companies you give money to and how you're voting with your money and such, it made me think of another project I'm working on, and that's basically involved in conscious consumption only. And where I'm coming from an innovation standpoint, when I look at that as an issue, I look at consumerism and consumption and say, like, okay, people don't know how to help themselves here. People want to change. They want to put their money towards a better cause. But when you walk into a CVS, when you walk into a Walbaum's, a pharmacy, whatever, what's actually offered to you? And on the branding that's offered to you, can you look on the back and see if it was sustainably made? Can you look on the back and see if it was ethically produced? Can you see if it was made in factories with child workers? Can you see if the chemicals in it are dangerous for your skin, if they're carcinogenic? You often can't. And if they can see the chemicals, do you even know which ones are what? And, you know, there's a lack of responsibility in a lot of spaces right now. And who's responsible for telling you what's behind the products that you buy? Is it the consumer to know that information? Is it the producer to make people aware of that information? Is it the distributor? Is it regulatory bodies like the FDA saying you have to have this marked on your packaging? Because if you don't have a responsible body, or you don't have at least a place where responsibility lies, what you have is now you have crisis. You have people buying things with no idea where the money goes to. You know, I have plenty of values, but are they really shown in the things I buy? Probably not. But is it necessarily my fault either? And as an innovation student, I came in and I saw that as an issue, and I assessed it in multiple different ways, and me and my friends have talked about it, and one of the things we see as the biggest issue is access and awareness. You know, and if you had access to products that were sustainably made, ethically made, you know, all of that, you'd likely want to buy them. But, you know, these big corporations and these giant lobbies, they don't actually get you the access that you want for those products, and they benefit from that. So we were discussing creating maybe an app or a space where people can purchase products from only ethical and sustainable companies, and know, or companies with an impact, and know while they're purchasing a product what the, you know, a fully transparent view of what the history of that product has been.
Right.
Where to come from, how is it made, how much money are you making off of me buying it? A fully transparent system is really loved by millennials, and, you know, there's a reason behind it. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from now, is I want to make a way to make people have access to a lot of these products in almost like an Amazon.com for ethical consumption, because I do think people want to do better. I think it's just too hard for people to do better, or they don't think they have the amount of time or, you know, mental capacity to remember all the chemicals or all the background information or all the bad companies out there. I mean, it's almost close to impossible. Right. You know, and leaving that on the responsibility of the consumer it's a very heavy weight on their shoulders. So I'm currently trying to figure out what's good ways to approach that, you know, execution-wise, a project like that. But I've been talking to a lot of people regarding that issue, and a lot of people I think are in the same space and trying to figure out how to make ethical products more open to the public, and even things that are sustainable that should have existed for years. You know, there's a company called Dame.
What is it called?
It's called Dame, D-A-M-E. It's Night. It's the female version of Night, actually, what Dame is. But it's a female products company, and they now make the world's first reusable tampon applicator. And I didn't hear about that until 2 days ago. And, you know, the fact that no one hears about it is, you know, one, it's taboo, or it's just not shared that often. Or there's these massive, massive companies that make millions off of this disposable wasted plastic.
Right.
That's a ton of plastic. That's a monthly endeavor that doesn't go away for a very long time for half of the population. And so it's a very overlooked small thing, but if you were to only use one applicator for, you know, years on end, the amount of plastic you're consuming per person, I mean, the numbers are exponential.
Right, exactly.
And so there's simple things like that to me, when I see them, I just think in my head, how could this not already be used by everybody? How could this not already be happening? How can we still have in every single gas station, we can walk up and buy a water bottle, but there's still not in every gas station a place for you to fill your water bottle? I would pay to fill my water bottle, good money. I might even pay 25 to 50 cents extra to not buy a plastic water bottle and get water at a gas station. It doesn't exist for me. And I know a lot of other people that would feel the same way. I have my water bottle in my backpack. I never go anywhere without it. But where can I actually fill it? There's only so many places, you know? I think that's ridiculous, coming from a sustainability point. There's so many things that seem almost nonsensical that we haven't, you know, discussed, distributed, or made the news. And that's a big part of the problem, is making it accessible to people. That company and that product is not overwhelmingly, not that it's not successful, but not known about. You know, I didn't know about it until just now, and I'm a woman. I definitely use all those products.
Right.
And none of my friends knew about it either. And I think to myself, how do we bridge that gap? How do we get companies like that deserve my money, that I want to give my money to, that have the impact that I want to associate myself with? How do I get myself and others like me to actually hear about that company? Right? Because most of those companies don't have the money either to get the advertising out there. And it's an interesting place to be. And even if we didn't hear about those companies, why aren't we demanding from other companies that they do similar? Why aren't we demanding from giant plastic consumption companies that, hey, we want glass bottles and we want things that we could refill somewhere, and we want this and that, and like you said, it's hard to create a boycott, but it's also hard to expect change if you're not willing to be part of the process. And so I put part of the responsibility on companies to change and become more ethical and more sustainable and produce and distribute their products better. But I also put half of the weight on consumers and knowing where your money is going, and really, despite the difficulty that comes behind it, trying to find out what the source of that is. Because once you're not giving money to those giant corporations, you're taking money out of a lobby that you may or may not agree with. You know, and lobby systems in general are, for the most part, taking your money and not sharing your values with other people.
Right.
Because when you buy something from them, you're not telling them, I'm giving you this money because of my values. I'm giving you this money because of my shampoo. But with that shampoo money, they do a lot else, and it's a hard thing to fight. But if you backtrack all the way to where you're putting your dollars, truthfully, I don't think it's necessarily as difficult as people think. I think it's just finding the accessible, place to get those products to those people and to give them the chance to have an impact with their dollar.
Wow, Sarah, you said a lot there. Want to ask you, I see the challenge. You see people, I believe that a lot of people share this, at least a group of people share the values that you're talking about. Others are probably on the fence. Others are not aware. Others are, and I think the majority are too busy to even stop and think about it because they're living. They're paying their bills. They're doing their errands. They're going to work, and here you are, a group of people such as yourself are saying, it's like, hey, stop for a second, pause for a second, and think about the impact of everything that you do and everything that you don't do. And people's like, really? Let's get real. I don't have time to do this. I got to watch my show in freaking 20 minutes right now, or I got to be doing this, and whatnot. And I think that's an aspect of where we are in our society right now, that a lot of times people don't participate because they're elsewhere, and the priorities are in different places. And it's actually asking some of us, the majority of us, to say, it's like, what? I have to, because you said the transparency is not there, and the accessibility and the awareness is not there, so you're going to have to do a little more work. Are you willing to do that? And that's a question you got to ask yourself. Am I willing to take this time away from something else, whatever it is that I'm doing, to be conscious and be aware of that?
Absolutely.
And I think that's it's a variable that of what wonderful work that you guys are doing that has to be considered. And
I think it's the biggest variable.
Yeah.
So,
but it's so exciting to hear you talk, and to hear that, your generation, or part of your generation, is really focused on some of the things that it's imperative for the survival of this planet and for the survival of humanity, and it's invigorating. It's very inspiring. And I hope that, you being a guest here will inspire many to, to stop and think for a second and then just pause and get off autopilot, because I think a lot of people in society are on autopilot, and because they got to do the things that they got to do.
Absolutely.
And those things you just got to make a conscious effort and got to be intentional about it to be able to partake in that. But I think by just sharing this and with us here, I think it's a step, and I think if all of us do take these conversations and take a moment of the day to say, what Sarah's sharing with us, it's a value, it's an importance. It's important is how does it impact my family, how does it impact my friends, my community, and everything else. So I just want to say thank you, Sarah, for coming here.
Thank you, Cello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so proud of you. You're awesome. This is great. And I just want to say thank you for my, for our guests. I mean, people watching today, for participating, and, come again to the next show. Have a good day. Sarah, you were great.
Oh, gosh, I was babbling.